Very Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope that you are having a wonderful Christmas weekend and that under your tree are all the things that you wanted. Because I know what you really wanted: a bunch of socks, underwear, cologne. And I'm sure under your tree, all that stuff is there, and you're going to love it this weekend, aren't you? Absolutely. Hey, you know, we have romanticized the Christmas event as if it was a Hallmark movie. But quite frankly, the real story is quite different than the sweet Christmas pageants that most of us have seen at church or maybe in the movies, where there are angels singing and Mary, the mother of Jesus, is calmly holding her newborn son, while Joseph stands nearby looking on a quiet and immaculate scene. Well, it actually went down a little differently than that. Have you ever been in a barn with farm animals? You remember how it smelled? Not like a bakery, that's for sure. And the place where Jesus was born wasn't some nice big red barn like you might see in Iowa. No, it was really a little cave where animals could be herded to keep them out of the weather. Now, I don't know of a delicate way to say this, but instead of imagining a nice, clean, sterile place with fresh, clean hay for a newborn, think instead of a rock-walled cave cut out from a mountainside where sheep, donkeys, and perhaps other animals were eating and sleeping. I mean, to be honest with you, it had maybe the smell more of an outhouse or a zoo than a Hilton. We have historically castigated the innkeeper for putting Joseph and Mary in the same place as the animals, but because everyone was required to go to their place of birth for a census, accommodations were frankly hard to come by. Now, this wasn't a Marriott, by the way. That's not how it worked back then. This was just some guy who would rent out a vacant room to travelers, and his limited space was already occupied. He could have just sent them on their way, but he did the best he could by giving them what he had. You know, that's really all any of us can do. Give what we have, not what we wish we had. So don't be so tough on the innkeeper. In this scene, Mary's in labor. She's ready to deliver. Now, I was in the room when all three of my children were born. I'm pretty sure that there in Bethlehem, this was not a silent night, okay? Especially since it was her first birth and there was no doctor to administer an epidural. There was no nurse standing by to assist. Her mother wasn't there either, not even a close friend. All she had was Joseph, her teenage husband-to-be. She was probably between 14 and 15 years old, not this mature woman that we've thought of. And Joseph wasn't exactly able to be of much help since he was probably scared out of his mind. Far from home, here was a baby about to be born that he knew wasn't his, and he's supposed to believe that the father wasn't some other teenage boy, but God. Folks, it takes a lot of faith to believe that. I'm pretty sure there was some screaming and crying going on, and when the baby was born, the Bible tells us that Mary wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. Swaddling clothes? You've heard that all your life. It just means that she took some cloths and wrapped him very tightly in them like a little burrito and put him in a food dish for the animals. Because that's what a manger is. It's a food dish where the animals gobbled up their dinner. And it was in this filthy, lonely, smelly, and forsaken place that God showed up to save the world. Probably not the way that you or I would have planned it. I mean, his birth was hardly fit for a king, barely appropriate for a poor refugee from a third world country. But it wasn't a mistake. God's timing for the birth wasn't off like it was our own first child. When that happened, our doctor assured us that it was a girl. Our doctor told us just before Thanksgiving that instead of a December 15th due date, which was the original one, the baby was going to be late and expect the arrival right around Christmas Day. So the doctor, having predicted the birth being a month or more away, headed off to deer camp to go deer hunting. And the little bundle showed up 4 days later. And the she was a he. Yeah, you got that wrong too. But in Bethlehem, God was right on time. And there was no mistake in his arriving in such an humble and frankly degrading circumstance. Because even in his arrival, he identified with the lowliest and least desirable place imaginable. And you know, Jesus still shows up in places we might not ever expect. You'll probably think that he'll be in the castle with the finest people. But Jesus will actually show up in the smelly little caves to be near the neediest people. That is the real Christmas. And the good news is, he is still showing up in places you wouldn't think he'd ever go in order to love and save the people that you might not expect him to care about. But aren't you glad he does? Because that's how he found us.